Welcome back to the We Want Picks channel. I am Artem MMA and I will be breaking down Bellator 292 Nurmagomedov versus Henderson. It should be a very good card. I'm really looking forward to it. It is going to be the first round or the first set of fights of the first round of the Bellator lightweight tournament, which I'm really looking forward to. And in fact, there's actually the champion in the tournament in Usman Nurmagomedov, which is going to be a very exciting fight, taking on the former UFC champion and multiple-time Bellator title challenger, Valentin Henderson. But before we get into that, obviously you guys might know by now, We Want Picks does have an awesome membership service. If you do want to sign up on the We Want Picks website and you want to get into it, you can actually get a 3-day free trial by using my code ARTEM. So ARTEM will get you a 3-day free trial to the We Want Picks membership service, and with that service you get all of Jacob's bets, you get all of Angelo's bets, and there is a couple more things that will be added to that service as well. I do know that they're working very hard to update the website and update that membership service to make even better things happen in the future, so definitely something to keep your eye on. And if you want to get into it now but you're not too sure what's there, you can use a 3-day free trial using my code ARTEM, ARTEM. But now let's just get straight into the picks. And as standard with almost every Bellator card these days, they do have a lot of up-and-coming guys on the prelims of their cards in the first few fights of the card, so there's not a lot of information to go off of. And speaking of not a lot of information to go off of, especially in this debuting fight, we've got Dupree Stewart taking on Dimitri Grigoriades. Both guys are making their debut as a professional. Both guys have an amateur experience. Dimitri's got 4 fights, Dupree's got 5, and he did go 5-0 as an amateur. What I have noticed is Dupree Stewart is a very good grappler, and he does seem to be the better grappler out of the two. So I am going with him by submission. This is just a very quick pick just to make the pick. I wouldn't really recommend betting on someone making their pro debut because obviously amateur and pro fights are a little bit different. The main big difference is probably the 3-minute rounds. Now they've got 5-minute rounds, but yeah, I've got Stewart by submission just because he seems to be a good grappler. The next one is Theo Haig taking on Adam Walmsley. Now Adam Walmsley has actually fought a couple of up-and-coming decent guys in his career. You know, he did fight Earl Small's 3-0 in Cage Fury FC, which is a very good regional promotion. And then he also fought a 1-0 guy a while ago. But the thing is, with this guy, he just has not been fighting very often whatsoever. The thing about Theo Haig is he is a very good guy. He seems to be a prospect that Bellator's trying to build, only 26 years old. Only one pro fight under the Bellator banner as a 1-2 guy, another guy that is probably meant to beat, and then he did have an amateur fight 3 years ago. Theo Haig does have a wrestling background, and he does have a boxing background as well. He seems to put it together pretty good, whereas Adam Walmsley hasn't fought in a long time. He hasn't fought for 2 years, and then 3.5 years ago was when he last fought. Theo Haig should be the better wrestler. I think he's going to take it to the mat and get the finish that way, so I do go with him in this one here. Minus 900 though, it's a bit of a weird one. The next one is Wladimir Govier taking on Sean Tucker. This should be a pretty fun one. I mean, Wladimir Govier is actually a guy that I've looked into a lot because I looked into his record and looked into his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu past, and actually he competed in the 2021 World IBJJF International Tournament, and you can actually see him right here. His name is Wladimir Govier Masi da Cunha, I believe is how it is pronounced, and he was actually in the Ralph Gracie team for the World Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu Championships. If you do go back all the way back to about 2014 or 2015 or so, you can see that he was actually associated with Nova União as well, so maybe he got a bit of MMA training then. He didn't look very impressive though in his last fight. You know, he fought this guy who was 2-4, Corey Mogenberg. He was a little bit smaller than him as well, and he did get the KO, he did get the finish, but man, it was very sloppy on the feet. The fight didn't really go to the mat too much, and when it did, Govier did show pretty good jiu-jitsu to be fair, but he didn't show like the world level jiu-jitsu that he's showing. So I'm hoping that he's going to take this fight to the mat against Sean Tucker, and I'm hoping what he's going to do is he's going to find that submission. I do have Wladimir Govier by submission. He does train out of AKA and also the Ralph Gracie team, as kind of stated in the International World Jiu-Jitsu Tournament. I've definitely spent too much time breaking down this fight. Sean Tucker, I mean, is an interesting case. He won his one fight by decision over a guy that was 0-2, and then before that he's just getting finished. He has fought for Bellator before in another situation, probably maybe a fight that he was meant to lose as well. I mean, 2 0-1 guys going at it. It's just weird. I've got Govier by submission just because of his submission background, or jiu-jitsu background, should I say, but it's just a weird fight, and Govier did not look very impressive in his debut either against Corey Mogenberg, I will point out as well. Layard Anderson taking on Rogelio Luna. This should be a fun one. To be fair, it should be a very fun fight. I do have Layard Anderson here. He should be the better wrestler and grappler, but Rogelio Luna should be the better striker in the matchup. I mean, Layard Anderson is a good wrestler and grappler. That's kind of what he does. He wrestles and grapples. I mean, he got a TKO due to Crucifix. He's got a submission against JT Donaldson, who had a losing record at the time. And then he did make his debut and won by split decision, but that was a long time ago. He was only 20 years old. So obviously, he's made a lot of improvements since then. He's obviously developed a lot as a fighter. And Rogelio Luna as well is a pretty decent guy himself. So it's interesting that two guys, I mean, technically undefeated, 1-0 versus 3-0 guys, are being matched against each other. And Luna had a pretty good amateur career, went 3-1, and lost to a 5-1 guy. And then he won his debut against Socrates Hernandez. And that was a very fun fight. That was an awesome fight. It was a fun one. But I do think Layard Anderson's going to take him down and win with his wrestling and grappling. But Luna is pretty good. He's a pretty good striker himself for sure. Bobby Cerrone III is one of those guys that is definitely trying to be built up by Bellator. Bellator's doing all they can to make another AJ McKee, because they made AJ McKee like 18-0 and kind of built him up against increasingly difficult competition and really built a star out of him. But Bobby Cerrone III is the pick. Once again, he's a pretty good wrestler. He's a pretty good boxer as well himself. He won over a 1-on-1 guy, another 1-on-1 guy, and a debuting guy. And he does have a pretty good amateur career as well if you do look into it. He did go undefeated as an amateur, went 4-0. They've both actually fought the same guy. They do actually have a common opponent. And I believe it was in Miguel Painbert, because recently Bobby Cerrone III beat Miguel Painbert, and he looked a lot better in that fight than Alberto Garcia did. Alberto Garcia made it pretty competitive, whereas Bobby Cerrone III won it pretty convincingly. So honestly, just based off that, you can kind of pick Bobby Cerrone III. He should be able to outclass Alberto Garcia here, and he should be able to beat him in this fight. Now we move on to Julius Angelis versus Dovletsan Yagshi if I did say his name correctly. This fight is hard to call, because Julius Anglicus is a very good striker, but what he does struggle with is very good wrestlers and grapplers, and that is what Dovletsan Yagshi is. He's a very good wrestler and grappler, and when he gets on top of you, he's very powerful and very strong. He's got ground and pound TKOs. He got his last fight by ground and pound TKO. He's actually got a lot of KOs in his record. He's got 12 of them. If my mind does correct me, it is correct. So he's got 12 KOs in his career, but they were a lot earlier on in his career. He recently has been going the distance against Carl Albrechtsen. He did get outclassed and out-wrestled quite convincingly as well by Corey Anderson, which was interesting. Julius Anglicus is on a little bit of a slide. He's one of those guys that was built up by Bellator, but man, I just feel like there's a path to victory for Dovletsan Yagshi in this one here, and it is to use that wrestling and grappling and stay strong on top. And I'm going to go with that as the underdog, but Julius Anglicus, if he can defend the takedowns, maybe he could do his own offensive takedowns and get on top of Dovletsan and kind of mitigate what Dovletsan can do on the ground. Maybe he could have success too, because both guys are pretty well-rounded, but I would say Anglicus is the better striker. But Dovletsan, he's just got that clear path to victory by taking down Anglicus and staying on top of him with his ground and pound. I'm not that confident in it, to be honest. It's actually a very, very hard fight to pick, and a lot of people are picking Anglicus. It definitely is an opportunity for Anglicus to get a win back. But I'm looking at Dovletsan, I'm just looking at his fighting style, and I think it actually matches pretty well to defeat Julius Anglicus by taking him down and using that ground and pound. But it's not like Anglicus is losing to just anyone. He lost to Phil Davis, who's a very good, experienced fighter. Vadim Nenkov, who is one of the best light heavyweights in the world right now. I feel like Dovletsan Yagshi just has a he's got that style. I think he's got that style to defeat Anglicus. I'm going with him. It's a very, very close and tough fight, though. The next fight of the night is going to be Khalid Murtazaliev versus Tony Johnson, and I do have Khalid Murtazaliev to win this one here. He is a pretty sizable favourite, but I do think it makes sense. Styles do make fights. Khalid is a pretty good offensive wrestler and grappler, and Tony Johnson has just showed not really the best takedown defense in the past. When he does get taken down, he can get up pretty quickly, but the problem is he's still getting taken down, and I feel like a guy like Khalid, He's going to make you pay for getting taken down, and he's going to wear on that gas tank like a lot of offensive wrestlers do. You get up, you get taken down again. You get up, you get taken down again. It's just a lot of energy expended to get up, only to get taken back down. Tony Johnson, though, I mean, he hasn't fought in a while. He hasn't fought for 2 years. He lost to Dalton Roster, who's a very good up-and-coming guy, to be fair. But before that, he beat a guy that was 4-5, and then before that, he did win on Dana White's Contender Series, but I think Khalid Murtazaliev has fought a very good level of competition, especially compared to the 4-5 guy that Tony Johnson won and Dalton Roster, but Dalton Roster's very, very good himself. I do have Khalid for his offensive wrestling. He was in the UFC for a bit, but he had some USADA complications, I guess you could say. Bellator picked him up anyway. He beat Fabio Aguilar, who was 17-1 at the time, and has gone 1-1 since then. I think Khalid's just going to win with his offensive wrestling and grappling over an almost 40-year-old Tony Johnson that hasn't fought for 2 years. And now we move on to the next one. We do have Josh Hill versus Cass Bell. Unfortunately, I do have to admit to you guys, I'm a pretty honest person. I picked both of these guys' last fights incorrectly. I picked Cass Bell to lose against Jared Scoggins, and I picked Josh Hill to win against Marcus Breno. And in that fight with Cass Bell versus Jared Scoggins was very close and competitive, but Cass Bell did actually get the win on my scorecard. I thought he looked pretty impressive. It was very close and competitive though. Josh Hill, on the other hand, did not have the most competitive fight against Marcus Breno, who was making his Bellator debut, an LFA guy from Brazil as well. And he was a very good prospect, maybe a guy in hindsight the UFC should have picked up, because he made Josh Hill look like he doesn't even belong in there, and now he's actually going to be fighting Danny Sabatello, so keep your eye on that matchup. It should be a pretty fun one, but I do have Josh Hill in this one here. I think he's the better striker. Cass Bell's a pretty good wrestler, good offensive wrestler, but Josh Hill is a good offensive wrestler as well. But I feel like a lot of his opponents, they fear the takedown, which does make Josh Hill's striking look a little bit better than it is. So what we've got in this matchup is two good wrestlers, but Josh Hill, obviously, he's got more experience. In my opinion, he's also fought the better opponents as well, although Cass Bell has fought Joanel Lugo and Rafael Stotts. If you do look through Josh Hill's whole track record, he's fought some good guys himself. Eric Perez, who's on this fight, Jared Scoggins himself, he's fought Rafael Stotts himself, Jesse Arnett as well on TKO, Taylor Lapalus as well, who's now been re-signed to the UFC, Marlon Moraes as well. Like, he's fought some very, very good guys, just to rattle off a few names on that discography, or on that record. I've got Hill by decision. I think the fight goes the distance. Maybe Cass Bell could make something happen, and maybe he could take the win, but I think Josh Hill's going to win with his striking and also with his offensive wrestling himself. Enrique Barsola taking on Eric Perez. Both guys are former UFC fighters. It's interesting because Eric Perez decided to not re-sign with the UFC when he was having a lot of success in the UFC. He signed to Combate Americas instead, and then he's been picked up by Bellator, and Enrique Barzola was just signed straight to Bellator from the UFC when he come off that draw against Rani Yahya. He's then gone on to go 2-2, but against very good competition. You know, Enrique Barzola just lost to Juan Archuleta, who's a great fighter, and Nurmagomedov, who's also a great fighter. He also beat Nikita Krylov, who's a pretty young, up-and-coming guy. Eric Perez, you know, he's coming off a win after a couple of losses, but he did lose to Toby Meich, who, okay, in hindsight, it's not really the best losses, and Josh Hill, who I was just talking about before. I do have Enrique Barzola to win this one here. Eric Perez and Barzola both have pretty similar offensive grappling styles, because they both pretty good at ground and pound. They both throw a lot of elbows when they get on top. They're both very good offensive grapplers. Enrique Barzola, I think, might be the better striker, slightly better striker, and what he does bring is pretty fast hands, to be fair, and also he does have good counter striking as well. He's got a good reaction time at being able to counter the shots, but Eric Perez had a very successful UFC career, especially at a very young age as well. We're talking like 2016, 7 years ago. He was only 25 years old, up-and-coming guy, and yeah, he fought a lot of good guys. He actually beat Taylor Lapalus himself, and he had a lot of success in the UFC, but we will be going with Enrique Barzola in the matchup. I think he does win. I think he can mix it up with the striking. I think he can mix it up with his offensive grappling. I think he can get on top of Eric Perez. He will have to watch some submission attempts here and there, but I think if he can get on top of Eric Perez and rain down some ground and pound, he will have a lot of success in the matchup. I'm really looking forward to this next fight, and it is worth noting this is the last fight on Michael Page's contract. So You bet UFC is probably looking at this and maybe trying to snag Michael Page from Bellator if he decides to not re-sign with Bellator. Michael Page has expressed a bit of interest as well with signing to the UFC. So maybe you see Page in the UFC. You don't know. But this is a fun fight. I am a huge fan of Goiti Yamauchi. I have called him Goiti Yamauchi in the past. I'm really sorry, I think I've said his name wrong for a very long time. But I'm a very big fan of Goiti Yamauchi. He is a great fighter. 21 submission wins. He's never lost by submission, and that kind of tells you how good of a grappler he is. No one's been able to sub him. He knocked out Naaman Gracie in his last fight, and that kind of clip almost went viral in a way because he kind of was baiting the uppercut the whole time, and then he finally got it. He submitted Levan Chakali in a round, Chris Gonzalez in a round. Lost a close fight with Dan Murray. Like, I really like Goiti Yamauchi. This guy is a very entertaining fighter. He's just got entertainment all over him. He's only 30 years old. Very experienced as well. This is his 34th professional MMA fight, which is incredible. But MVP, I think, might be a pretty tough matchup for him because MVP is a very slick striker. He did have that boxing fight with the GOAT, Mike Perry, which was an interesting one. I mean, some people scored it for Mike Perry, but when I looked online, a lot of people scored it for Michael Page, for MVP. But at the end of the day, I think the MVP is going to win, man. I do. He's got a very slick kickboxing style. He's got a reach advantage as well, and he's actually a little bit taller as well than Goiti, who's only 5'10". MVP 6'3", and he's got a 79-inch reach as well. He's actually got very long arms for 170 pounds. I've got MVP. I think he's going to be able to pick apart Goiti from the outside. But maybe if Goiti is able to get the takedowns, MVP does have great takedown defense. But if he can get the fight to the mat, maybe he could make something happen with his BJJ. I've got MVP. Goiti has never been finished before. I don't think MVP is going to finish him, but maybe I could be wrong. I've got MVP by decision. I think he's going to be able to kickbox from range. If he plays this fight smart, I think he should be able to win the decision. But if he rushes in and just lets himself get taken down by Goiti, maybe we could have a different fight on our hands. But I've got MVP, and it's definitely a fight to watch because I'm definitely thinking that UFC might be looking to sign him themselves, which will be interesting. But we will be moving on in the card. Valentin Mordovsky versus Linton Vassell. Unfortunately, Valentin Mordovsky hasn't had the most success in his last couple of fights. You know, he did have the accidental eye poke against Steve Murray, which was going to probably be a very exciting fight. I was looking forward to it. And he had a very close fight with Ryan Bader as well. And I believe he dropped Ryan Bader as well at the start of the fight. But before that as well, he did fight Tim Johnson, who's an older guy now. Roy Nelson is an older guy. But yeah, Linton Vassell, also an older guy, almost 40 years old now. He's also fought Tim Johnson himself. He finished Tim Johnson, but man, Tim Johnson's been on a little bit of a losing streak recently. Beat Tyrell Fortune, who's an up-and-coming guy himself, an older guy as well. Ronnie Marks, and Sergey Karatonov, who is an older guy himself. I believe he actually fought for Eagle FC recently. But I do have Valentin Moldavsky here. He's a good boxer, he's a good striker, and he's a good grappler, good offensive wrestler as well himself. I do like Valentin in the matchup, and I do like Moldavsky as a fighter. I'm actually a bit of a fan of him as a heavyweight, and I think he brings excitement to the heavyweight division, and I think he should be able to get a finish over Linton Vassell. I know he's not really a finisher, but man, he did have a very fun fight with Ryan Bader, and Vassell's just not a young guy. He's almost 40 years old, so I'm thinking Moldavsky maybe closes the distance and catches Vassell with some of the shots that he was catching Brian Bader with, you know what I mean? We're going to move on to the co-main event, Tafik Masayev versus Alexander Shabalai. Both guys are pretty good grapplers. I would say Alexander Shabalai is the better striker out of the two, and both guys have different sort of styles of grappling as well. Shabalai, he does like to go for a lot of offensive submissions. He does have 7 submission wins on his record. I'm looking at Tafik Masayev. He's not really a submission guy. Look at him. He's got 16 wins by KO. A lot of them have actually come on the ground as well. He does get KOs on the feet as well, obviously. But when he does take guys down, he does like to use a lot of ground and pound. When you look at Alexander Shabalai, he's actually a guy that actually searches for a lot of submissions when he's on the ground. But he also does have good ground and pound himself. I do like Shabalai's striking. I think he is the better striker. But if you look at Masayev, man, a lot of this guy's wins have come very early on into the fight. A lot of first round finishes for Ryzen. A lot of fights against guys that aren't really all that great. Like, we've got a guy who we don't even know his record. We've got an 0-1 win here, 2-5, 0-1. I'm just nitpicking though at this point though. He did win over Marif Parayev, who was 20-1 at the time, but I've got Alexander Shabalay in this matchup here, another favourite. I think he's going to win. I think he's going to win by decision. Alexander Shabalay really impressed me in his last fight against Brent Primus. Looked really good. He was very aggressive as well. The thing about Alexander Shabalay is he's a very, very aggressive fighter. He likes to throw a lot of volume on the feet. He's very technical. And when the fight gets to the ground, he's always searching for submissions. He's always trying to make something happen as well on the ground himself. He beat Bobby King, who's an older guy now. He's beaten a couple of guys in Bellator. Tafik Musayev, not super experienced in Bellator, only 1-1. Only 1-0 in Bellator, my bad. But he does have that win over Patricky Pitbull in Ryzen, which is actually a very good win, because Patricky Pitbull went on to be the champion of Bellator. But I still think Alexander Shabalay gets this one done. And if he does end up fighting Usman Nurmagomedov, that's going to be a good one, man. It's going to be a very, very exciting fight, but I do have Shabalay to win by decision in the matchup. Maybe he could look for a submission. Maybe Tafik Musayev can make something happen with his KO power on the feet and on the ground. Like he's a bit of a beast, is Musayev, but I do think that Alexander Shabalay will be able to get it done. Man, he's a good prospect himself, and another guy. Bellator beat UFC to him, dude. Bellator's actually made a lot of really good signings as of recent. Now we've got the main event. Usman Nurmagomedov taking on Benson Henderson. It's a weird one. Benson Henderson, this isn't his first time fighting for a title as well. I believe he's actually fought for a title in lightweight and welterweight under the Bellator banner, but he just hasn't been able to become the champion. I believe, did he fight Michael Chandler for the belt? No, he didn't. I know he's fought for the title in Bellator twice and just hasn't been able to get it done. But I just think that Usman Nurmagomedov is going to beat him as well. He's minus 2,000 favorite, which is crazy. I mean, minus 2,000 favorites in MMA are very rare and they don't happen often, especially at this level as well, because this is a very, very high level fight. Benson Henderson may be an older guy, but at the end of the day, he is a UFC champion, a Strikeforce champion, two-time, I believe, to the top, to my knowledge, Bellator title challenger. He's on a win streak as well. He beat Peter Queally, who's a pretty well-known guy at this point in Bellator, Irish guy. He beat Islam Mamedov by split decision. I don't think he won that fight, but he was given the decision anyway. Now he's fighting Usman Nurmagomedov, who's very, very impressive. And the thing about Usman Nurmagomedov is he got the title shot without beating anyone ranked in Bellator. He literally got the title shot off beating Chris Gonzalez, who I think was making his Bellator debut at the time. He hasn't really fought the best guys, but he did absolutely dominate Patricky Pitbull, and he looked incredibly, incredibly good. He's an amazing kickboxer, but he's also a very good offensive wrestler. I mean, you kind of would have to be a pretty good offensive wrestler if you are coming out of Khabib's camp. And if I'm not mistaken, he is also Khabib's cousin. I do believe that that is also the case. I believe there is definitely a blood relation between Khabib and Usman Nurmagomedov, but at the end of the day, he hasn't really fought the best guys in the world, but he really should be able to beat Benson Henderson here. I think on the feet it could be a very fun fight, because Usman Nurmagomedov's a very good kickboxer. He throws a lot of kicks to the legs, to the body, and to the head. Benson Henderson's obviously pretty well known for being a very good striker himself, but when it comes to the wrestling and the grappling at this point in both of their careers, I feel like Usman Nurmagomedov is going to be the much better wrestler and grappler, and Benson Henderson, being the older guy, is going to be getting taken down, and Nurmagomedov should be able to find more success on the ground than Islam Mamedov did. I mean, Benson Henderson defended very well against Islam Mamedov, to be fair, but I feel like with someone that like Usman Nurmagomedov, who's going to be able to mix it up so much, he's going to be able to mix up his striking with his grappling a lot in this matchup, because that's what he does. He's such a great striker, but he's also such a great grappler himself. I think that he should be able to mix it up in this fight. I think it's going to go... Is it a 5-round fight? I don't know if it's a 5-round fight, because it's a tournament match. It is a 5-round fight, and so is Tafik Musayev versus Shabalay. Shabalay's still the pick anyway. Sorry guys, did not realise that at all at the time. I do have Usman Nurmagomedov to win a 5-round decision over Benson Henderson, or maybe a late submission. I mean, Benson Henderson's a tough guy though, because Benson Henderson doesn't get subbed by anyone. He hasn't been submitted in a long time. He's only been submitted twice. He went the distance in grappling against Damian Maia, which does fill a lot of people maybe with a little bit of which might fill a lot of people with a bit of confidence here in this one here if it does get to the ground. The last time he was submitted was against Anthony Pettis in 2013, I believe. That's a long time ago. I think Usman Nurmagomedov might be able to find a submission late, or he's going to go the distance with Benson Henderson. If he finishes Benson Henderson, I will be very, very impressed, but I do have him to win by decision. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Should be a great card. I'm looking forward to it. I'll definitely be watching it. Now that they have started broadcasting to New Zealand, it's awesome. So I'm really happy about that. I can easily watch the fights now. I don't have to do anything out of the ordinary to find the fights. So yeah, it should be great. I mean, the prelims are always free on YouTube. I will be in the chat on the YouTube prelims. I'm always in the chat on the Bellator YouTube prelims, but they are usually getting spammed a lot because thousands of people do watch it. But yeah, let me know what you think of the card. I'm looking forward to it, and as always, if you liked the video, please do like the video, subscribe for more, and it should be a great card. I'd look forward to it. It should be definitely a fun one to watch.